Welcome to Draft Sickos on the No Ceilings NBA podcast feed. I am your host, Maxwell Baumbach, and today I am joined by Dan Purcell, formerly of the New Orleans Pelicans and now the president of Scouts Central. Dan, how are you doing today?
Great. That theme, I feel like a wrestling theme right there. I'm ready to go out and,
Exactly.
wrestle John Cena.
me and Steven are big wrestling guys, so Corey hooked it up with that theme. He found that one, and I was like, that's the one right there. We got to roll with it. So
that is the theme. There's no doubt about it. That is the right one.
So for people who might not be familiar with you, we've had you on the No Ceilings channel before on the podcast feed. You've done shows with Corey and Albert. We're big fans of the work that you do, especially just the work that you put on the ground, going to all these practices, all these games, everything like that. So for people who might not be familiar with you, maybe they're newer to following the draft scene, they're just diving in now that we're after the All-Star break. Can you tell people a little bit about your background and what you do in the basketball world?
Sure. I was with the Pelicans for, 9-10 years, somewhere in there. Did a lot of stuff and learned a lot of things from a lot of really smart people, right? Mm-hmm. And then I took, obviously, what I had learned through the years. I played in college. Wasn't very good. I'm not going to sit here and act like I was good. I wasn't. I was actually having dinner with my college coach 2 or 3 nights ago, and he was trying to talk me up, and I'm like, Coach, I shouldn't even been on the floor. I don't know how you played me that much. Like, you're lucky I didn't mess it up more. And then I was on the AAU scene, or a spring circuit scene before EYBL and whatnot. I had the largest spring summer group in Louisiana at the time. I'm originally from Cleveland, and had guys like Thon Maker on my lower end teams, on the 8th grade team and whatnot. So just been around a lot of guys, been around a lot of stuff, and just still pedaling it to the grind now with Scout Central, which is company I formed, and we provide scouting services for NBA teams. So if you follow me either on X or Instagram, I always try to post where I am so that people can kind of keep up with where I'm at, because I am all over, as you've seen.
Yeah, no kidding. You're telling me about your schedule in the week kind of leading up to this, and I just appreciate you carving out the time with everything that you have going on. So always a pleasure to hear you and pick your brain. And with that, I wanted to pick your brain on somebody who is at the top of my draft board that is not at the top of your draft board, who is Alex Sarr, the 7'1" center from France, who is playing in the NBL this season for the Perth Wildcats. You had a tweet the other day, and it was something you talked about, Corey, with on the show when you were on the podcast feed previously, basically saying that you do not think you should have him number 1 in this class. So I like Alex Sarr. So I'm going to kind of give my piece, and you can kind of give yours. So with Alex Sarr, I see a guy who is 7'1", 7'5" wingspan, mobile, good body to fill out, can really put it on the deck. Solid decision maker, obviously not a point center. He's not Nikola Jokic, but makes good decisions with the ball. Very confident in his jump shot. He's become an increasingly assertive offensive player, able to blow by guys like Mitch Creek off the dribble, which is something you don't see a lot out of the big spot. And on defense, just quick laterally, protects the rim. Got to get stronger. Would be lying if I'd say I'm not concerned about the rebounding a little bit. But he's a guy that I think is kind of made for the modern NBA. And when I look at Victor Wembanyama and Chet Holmgren, I don't think he's in a class with those guys. But I do think the fact that we know that there are going to be a lot of NBA teams going forward that are going to play 5 out on offense with those young stars in the NBA, having a big man who can do those sort of things and potentially slide to play some 4 if the perimeter offensive skills come along, like that to me is really appealing. And in a draft with a little bit of uncertainty at the top, I'm kind of drawn to a guy where I see that sort of safety, but also just a necessary skill set with where the league is going. Why? And you are still high on Alex Sarr. You still like Alex Sarr. Right. He's a basketball player. It's the conversation that we have. But why do you think he kind of shouldn't be number 1 at this stage in the process?
Yeah, I want to make sure again, because there's a lot of people that half listen, right? And exactly, I want to make sure I'm very clear on where I stand with Alex Sarr. So I like Alex Sarr. It's not a matter of I hate him and I hope he just drowns in the draft, abyss. That's not it at all.
You have him high on your board, yeah.
I do. I have him top 5. It's not on my big board, right? I'm not going in order of what the records are right now. Just I have my own top 75 that I adjust every 30 days, 45 days. I would love to say that it never changes, but this draft is so wide open. It doesn't, I don't know that it's not going to change like 10 more times.
Sure.
So I all those things you said about Sarr, I'm on board. I think he's a really good player. Where I struggle, and again, this is where maybe I differ from everyone else. I'm not sure his ceiling is higher than many of these other top 5, top 8 guys. In terms of, it's kind of like you kind of get what you get with him. Yeah, he can fill out. There's no doubt. He can get stronger. No doubt. Maybe he can get, a little better finishing. Sure. Like he can do all of that, right? That's one of the things I always talk about when people ask me about how do I want to choose guys? Well, it's how much can I control compared to how much do they control, right? If I can control the skill development, the plan, the playing time, the coach, if I'm a front office guy and there's no coach, or if we have one that's in place, not control per se, but work with, so you can get different, minute rotations, lineups, et cetera, et cetera. If you can have that, then I'm going to probably take that guy, right? Somebody I can control a little more, who has a lot of raw stuff, if not measurables to go with it if it's a tie, right? So Sarr, I'm a big fan. It's not like I don't like him, but if you're going to be the number 1 pick, your upside has to be really good, and you have to change the game somehow for me. We talk about big men that were drafted first, second, or third, right? We'll just say top 3. These are the names that start coming out, and I want you can play this little game with me and really start to think about, did these guys change the impact of their team, and did defense have to change the way they play them? Victor Wembanyama.
Yep.
Absolutely, they have to change. Zion Williamson, absolutely have to change. Blake Griffin, absolutely had to change. Dwight Howard had to change. Shaq, Akeem Olajuwon, Patrick Ewing. We can keep going. David Robinson. Yeah. We can keep going with this exercise, and you find ultimately that the bigs that are drafted and have the most success in their careers, because if you're drafted number 1 or 2, you're supposed to be a franchise player. You're supposed to be the guy who's going to be there for 10 more years, or at least get to the 3rd contract and sign it, like Jaylen Brown, and be there for a long time, right? And that means your ceiling's super high. You're anchoring the team. And I'm not sure that Alex Sarr is an anchor to a team. I can't say if you put him on the Washington Wizards today that everybody in the league is going to go, oh my God, we got to change the way we play because he's killing us in the short roll, or he's killing us in, high pick and rolls, or they're doing a thing where he's on the second side and it's step ups, and he's, killing it on the short roll on step ups, or he's really getting to the rim and exploding over defenders and moving around defenders on the finish without, getting charges. And, these little things add up over the possessions. There's so many possessions now in the NBA. And also, I don't know that he's a threat from the outside. So if other teams aren't really game planning for him, for example, when you play the Spurs, if you were to play the Spurs tomorrow, what's the first thing you're saying? How do we contain Wemby? What do we have to do? Can we just limit his ability to get to the rim, around the rim? Can we just do that and maybe stop everyone else, right? Maybe we stop everybody else from scoring 20, right? But he may get his just because he's so elite, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. Blake Griffin was the same way. He was the same way. He went into the league. He was hurt. Remember that first year, and then he comes back and literally changes the way bigs start playing in the league, and are defended. And then you have people like Chet Holmgren. You know what I mean? I don't think you can sit here and say Alex Sarr is better than Chet Holmgren. So and he was number 2 pick. Yeah, he was but he should have been. I mean, he could have been 1 or 2. It could have been either. So this is where I actually heard over the weekend, somebody said to me, I don't really believe in comps. I actually think that you're doing yourself a disservice from a research standpoint if you say that, because it's just research. You're trying to find commonalities sometimes. You're trying to find ways that guys impact the game different. And I don't think Alex Sarr is going to do that. I don't think he's going to come in on day 1 and be the main guy. Like when Cade Cunningham got drafted, we all know who Detroit's building around.
Yeah, I think what I would push back with is I would say that the biggest thing ultimately in any draft is you're picking who's there. And for
Sure.
me, I still look at Alex Sarr, and I still think he's I just think he's more interesting than a lot of these guys. I think the issue there's some sort of issue that kind of gives me hang up with a lot of these other players, and we're going to focus a lot on other guys at the top of the draft, kind of throughout this episode. But for me, the thing I come back to with Sarr is, and we talk about comps and comparisons, he's not like too dissimilar from where a guy like Evan Mobley was in terms of his production at USC. They obviously ran a little bit more through him, so his assist numbers were a little bit higher.
His usage rate was higher, off the top of my head, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yep. And yeah, the role is obviously a little bit different. He's coming off the bench in Perth, whereas Mobley was obviously a starter. With Sarr, he probably has more insulation. Like if he's having a game where he's not doing that well, it's not the end of the world, where Mobley had to be the anchor of that defense. Probably a little bit more consistent as both a passer and as a perimeter defender than Sarr. But I think that Sarr is a much more assertive offensive player. And I think especially when it comes to his jump shot and being willing to take the three, the fact that they're taking around the same number of threes per game in their pre-draft season, and Sarr is doing that in much less playing time, I think is interesting. So to me, it's like if I can get somebody similar to Evan Mobley, even if I liked Evan Mobley a bit more coming out, like I don't hate that in this class. Would I love to get the guy that I think can change everything? Sure. I'm not sure that guy's there. But I think Sarr could be better than what else is on the table at this point. It's kind of where I'm at with him.
And I see where you're going with that. I don't disagree with you at all. I think, Mobley's solid, but Mobley was the fourth pick in the draft.
I think he went
fifth,
3.
Is it 3? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Jalen Green was 2, which
okay.
In hindsight, you take that one back.
But, well, even if you really watch Mobley right now, the Cavs are doing a very interesting thing, and they went on a 18-2. They were 16-2, I think, without Garland and Mobley in the lineup. I think it was 16. Might have been 15-2. 15-1. I can't remember exactly because Garland came back a little bit ago, and then Mobley came back.
Hot.
Yeah. So they've been doing a really interesting thing. They'll start those two guys, but then they never play together again the rest of the game. And why is that? Why, if Evan Mobley, and I like Evan Mobley again, I think he needs to, there's going to have to be something that happens next year because he has too much talent to not play the way he can play. There's a disconnect there because he could actually be way better in my opinion. I don't think that's part of the process. He's still on his first contract. Like we'll let him get it. Right. But the lineups that are actually coming with the Cavs, and I'll see how this all connects, but like, well, I'll show how it connects, but the Cavs are actually better with him off the floor and having Jared Allen. And then their second best lineup is then him at center and Allen off the floor. So it's an interesting argument, Evan Mobley, when he now on our sample size, I don't think he's been as good as he A could be and B should be. Right. And so if Sarr, I'm just using that as our example. If that's Sarr, if that's Sarr, that's scary at 1. That's scary to me at 1. I don't think Evan Mobley in this draft may go 1. I still think he goes 2 or probably 3 in this draft still. And I like Evan Mobley. Like I really like him. His talent's through the roof. I wish he would be way more efficient, and I wish he would stop being gun shy because he can shoot that thing, and he rarely shoots it, right? His form's great. If you actually look at his splits, like it screams shoot more threes, right? It literally screams shoot more threes. And it's an interesting thing you said with Mobley is, Sarr, I don't think Sarr's I don't think he's as good as Mobley because Mobley can shoot and he can't. It's just Mobley doesn't shoot, right? He doesn't shoot threes. Whereas Sarr, I don't think Sarr is going to be as good of a shooter as Mobley could be. But then Mobley's not taking them enough to make us think, oh, Mobley's a really good shooter, right? But if you look at his splits, they scream you should shoot more threes and get more volume up because you're actually going to be a better and more efficient player. It's very interesting how his profile shapes up. But I get what you're saying, and I listen. I like Mobley again. I like Sarr. I like Sarr. I think if the Wizards are sitting there at 3 or 4, that's a no-brainer. It's an absolute no-brainer for them to take Sarr if he's sitting there. If I'm San Antonio, you definitely can't. If San Antonio gets the first pick, why would you draft the same guy at the same position as the guy you did before? You're doing Sarr a disservice. They can't play together. you're asking for trouble, right? You're just asking for trouble. But Detroit is very interesting. As we go down the teams, right now we're looking at where we're at on the teams. Detroit has Jalen Duren. Duren is exactly the type of guy Monty likes. Like, it is exactly the guy that Monty likes at the big. He needs to get a little better defensively, and he's a little slow to rotate. But he's still only in his second year in the league. Like, he's young. He's way young. Yeah, and he's way ahead of the curve. So would the Pistons really want to say, hey, we're going to take Sarr and just, what do you do to Duren at that point? You literally, if you take Sarr, and you still have Jalen Duren on your team, the value of Duren has just plummeted, because it's like everybody knows that he's on discount because they have to get rid of him. Mm-hmm. Or do you play him together, but then you're taking minutes away from Sarr? You see what I mean? Like, I get that. You start diving into this, and it's like, well, if I'm Washington, all day. I mean, if I'm Washington at 1, I mean, why not in this draft? Why not make Sarr number 1? Sure. I could see that.
I think where I feel more optimistic about Sarr compared to Mobley, and this is the last thing we'll do on him, is that so Mobley was a 30% three-point shooter in college and 69% at the line on 1.2 a game. Sarr's at 29.8%, so percentage-wise, they're real close, but he's taking 2 a game. And I just think the fact that he's a little bit more assertive and like the indicators are close. Form-wise, I probably felt better about Mobley at the time in terms of just mechanics and the consistency of it. But I'm a little bit more confident in Sarr shooting it at some point, I think. One guy who we know can shoot it, though, is Reed Sheppard. So let's talk about Reed Sheppard a little bit.
Threw me a curve. I thought we were going with my man Jacobe, but okay.
Okay, yeah.
No. We'll go Reed. No, please go Reed. Please, because I was getting burned by this. People were saying I'm crazy that I wouldn't touch him, but go ahead.
Yeah, so let's talk about Reed Sheppard. Reed Sheppard is having a ridiculous season. He's shooting 50% from 3 on over 4 a game. It was a lot of, let's see what's going to happen when conference play gets here. He's still shooting 50% from 3 in conference play. A little bit less production inside the arc. He's one of those guys that everybody has a really strong take on for the most part. Some people that I've talked to are like, I wouldn't touch him top 20 just because of the body, whatever. Other people say, hey, this production is so ridiculous, he's top 3. Where do you kind of settle on this 6'2" Kentucky guard that is just producing like crazy and having this obscene defensive output and makes good decisions with the ball and can really shoot it, but hey, maybe athletically he doesn't totally look the part. What do you see in Reed Sheppard right now?
So first off, kudos to Reed Sheppard, because I know he works his tail off. He's, everything I've heard, he's a really good kid, right? And kudos to him for being able to start the season where nobody thought he was even remotely in this draft.
No. To
guys having him, like you said, top 4, top 3, but I don't know, somewhere in there, right?
Yep.
So kudos to him. Like, I want to make sure, like, that's awesome that a guy has done that, right? Coach Cal even said he's super surprised at it. Like, he even said this. I didn't see this coming. So there's a couple things just in my mind that I start with, right? One, the Kentucky system benefits him extremely. Like, it tilts it plays right into his strengths, right? So he's gotten better, which is the first thing. Second thing is the system is so guard heavy, and it gets him into spots that are really, really good. And then Cal's even starting to run him off screens a little bit to where he's able to get even a little more space, right? So I appreciate what he's doing. I ran some numbers. I knew I was coming on. So I wanted to run a few advanced numbers here, right? So I first did it against NBA guys in the last 3 seasons. I won't get too much in the weeds of exactly what it was. I did like half-court offense, transition, ISO, PNR, spot up, at the rim, catch and shoot, all that stuff, right? And then we put some weight to it and averaged it out. His box scores, if you look at them from an NBA standpoint, are Grayson Allen. Like, they are almost identical. I'm literally almost to the number identical over the last 3 seasons of Grayson Allen compared to Reed Sheppard this year. That's pretty good. Grayson Allen's a starter, one of the best shooters in the league, right? Mm-hmm. So if we did that now filtered on guys his size, because Grayson Allen's about 6'4.5", almost 6'5",
and like bulky too.
Right, a different body. This is where it gets interesting, right? On paper, he looks exactly like Grayson Allen, but we all know that Grayson Allen is a much more physical, bigger shooter, right? Like, and he creates separation in the paint with his physicality and then comes off the screen, right? If he's not getting the swing from Beal or Duran or, whoever didn't, on the front side, they didn't get it. So on the second side, he's there. His NBA comps over the last 3 seasons, similar to size, Lonnie Walker and DeAnthony Melton. Similar in size, right? So we just went height, and that's pretty much where we went from there, right? He's about 6'1.5", 6'2". Some people have him at 6'4". It's not true. I've stood right next to him. He's not 6'4". So college now we went into college comps, right? These are some of the names over the last 3 years that he starts being like. Joshua Hamilton, Keith Dinwiddie, Alex, I don't know how to say the guy's Hubresk. I don't know how to say his name.
Okay. These are not, even ringing a bell.
Bryce Fitzgerald, Cameron Barry. Like, these are the names that we're starting to come with. The highest on you probably have the guy who's most known as Isaiah Stewart.
Okay. And what's this based on? Because Isaiah Stewart's like a big, is it like?
It's a player. Let me see it here. It's an average of similarity, we called it, between me and my advanced guy. So it's efficiency based on what these guys are, along with like all of the weighted things that I spoke about over the last 3 years. So we took single seasons from the last 3 years. So it's not so much the names that are on here, it's the fact that none of those names pop out. Like, none of them are pick anybody that was a shooter. Right, we can take all these guys out that were shooters. Right, we can take Isaiah Stewart out, obviously, if you want to. But that's the only guy on this list that pops out as like a guy who played in the NBA or as an NBA project. So, like, it's all over, and that's what I'm trying to get with Reed is you have these Grayson Allen stats from a pro standpoint, which is great, but from a college standpoint, you don't really have anybody that has a similar statistical profile to him, and that makes him kind of an anomaly, right? I don't know if you remember, but Jimmer Fredette had the same type of thing happen to him.
Yeah, but Jimmer wasn't like block rate over 5. You know what I mean? Like block rate over 2.5.
No,
rate over 5. Like that's some crazy stuff.
We're talking straight
numbers.
We're talking straight offense right now, right?
Okay.
Just straight offense. Jimmer had this thing about him too, right? Crazy shooter. I mean, Jimmer is one of the best shooters ever. I mean, shout out to Jimmer, one of the greatest human beings ever too. But as you dig into these offensive stats, because that's really where he's going to make his money, right? He's going to make his money. I don't know that his block rate's going to be able to stay that way in the NBA. Sure. I just don't. I think that's an anomaly to where we're at right now. So if we're going to pick him at 3 or 4, we have to think best case he's Grayson Allen, even if doesn't have the physical profile of him. Or is he Lonnie Walker, DeAnthony Melton? And you want to say those statistical categories, along with his size, he's 6'2", we'll call him. Mm-hmm. We want to take that 4. What guys with that profile at that height and that physical base have gone 4, 3?
Yeah, I think
2.
Again.
My question to you is, why is he different than everybody that's come before him? Mm-hmm. How is he the one guy? He's the Steph Curry of this that is just changing lives and changing the game and changing his impact. Why is he that one guy in the last 25 years to do that?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would probably point to would be his efficiency and volume as a 3-point shooter is like ridiculous. It's not super far off from where a guy like JJ Redick was as a freshman, which again, JJ probably, I think, listed at 6'3" during his time at Duke, 6'4".
JJ's 6'4", 6'5", yeah.
So again, he's smaller, but I think that's a big part of it. I do think he's a really good quick decision maker. As the other thing too, he does have an assist rate over 20 that I think would probably be quite a bit higher if he was a guy that got to operate on the ball a little bit more than he does. He's playing in a system with multiple guards, so that's part of it as well. But even just looking at like assist rate, BPM, and some of those other numbers, like there's other good guards. Like he's not super far from like Peyton Pritchard from like an assist rate, 3-point percentage standpoint.
Peyton Pritchard,
which again, not crazy, but again, like close to a guy like Brandon Pajemski, who's kind of moving the needle a little bit.
Sure.
Not
I
far
like
off.
Pod.
Again, body type different, but a guy like Jalen Brunson, if you look at like the synergy numbers as far as like spot up efficiency, pick and roll ball handler efficiency, pretty similar. They go about their business in entirely different ways, but speaking purely from a production standpoint. Another guy I kind of wonder about in terms of role is someone like Mike Conley. Again, a guy who is stronger, much better on the interior, but is kind of, as he's gotten older, turned into a guy that's a perimeter oriented 3-point shooter who can run a little bit of offense. Not usually your main guy that you're running everything to, but just a reliable decision maker, shooter, and pesky on-ball point guard defender. Like, I think that's kind of a path for him. And again, it just goes to, here are the guys in this draft. Like, do you want a guy who kind of resembles Laker or Mike Conley, or do you want a guy who you think might stink? I feel pretty good about that. Like, I feel good about him compared to those guys. And even like a guy like Jordan Hawkins. Like, Jordan Hawkins has had some moments this year. He's not stellar. Like, there's a reason that he's not in the rotation every night, and he's had to go back down to the G League. But from a pure shooting standpoint, pretty similar and probably a much better on-ball defender than a guy like Hawkins. And Hawkins couldn't pass at all when he's chased off the line. Like, that was a huge adjustment that he's going to have to make to be an effective NBA player. And the fact that Reed can already do that, it makes me feel like he's going to see the floor earlier than we might think and be pretty good.
I mean, I hope so for him. I just can't get on board with putting a top 5. I think, and this is a very strong statement, and I hope I'm wrong. I do hope I'm wrong. I think anybody that drafts him in the top 5 is probably looking for a new job in 2 years.
Wow, interesting.
Top five. I think you're asking for trouble, and it's not because I don't think he's going to be good or anything. It's the fact it's number 3 pick. Like this, you can't. You have to take the upside guy. You have to take the size and the if somebody were to take him over Cody Williams or Jacobe Walter, I'm sitting here stunned. Stunned.
Do you want to do? Let's do Cody Williams now then, since you brought him.
Oh, good name. Let's talk about a guy that I love. All right.
Yeah. So give me the Cody
Talk
Williams.
To me about Cody.
Because I like Cody. I wrote a column about Cody earlier this year. I think there's a lot
was really good.
Like tailor-made second side skills, like ready to go. I'm kind of weirded out by the fact he doesn't rebound at all. I feel like sometimes the game is just sort of happening around him and he can be a little bit passive. So I have Cody like top 7. He's been in that range for me for a long time, but there's still times where I get a little bit scared. So give me the sell on like Cody Williams is a guy I'd 100% take over some of these guys that we've talked about already.
I mean, what really sold me on Cody. I'm thinking Jacoby. Sorry, Jacoby's.
We're going to get to him later, too.
I know. I'm excited. One of my favorites. So Cody, if you really look at it, the thing that's really, that's really impressed me is his 3-point percentage and his shooting this year, because he's labeled as a non-shooter. He's labeled as a guy who can only get to the cup, and like his finishing around the rim is top tier. This is what you need. And the thing is about it, he comes from a very smart lineage, guys who know how to play. His older brother obviously is one of the highest IQ guys in the league, right? And he's going to have some of those plays and develop them over time. So with that being known, his lineage is already really good. I know he's going to be a super smart kid regardless. He can get by guys. He can get to the paint. And he can float over anybody. He can get around just about any big in college basketball. You look at him in the Pac-12 when he played Arizona, like he's getting around those bigs or finishing over the top of them. And those are big boys there. Huge. They're not like 6'8". They're 7'2", 7. Like he did a good job of getting to them and getting to their, right in front of where they were going to be, getting to the float, getting, faking him out, going around to the side, using the rim as a defender. He does a lot. That's his elite skill. His elite skill is his finishing. And as a 2 guard in this league, you have to be able to either shoot that thing, like, Buddy Hield is going to have a 12-year career just because he literally, he's going to shoot 40% from 3 every single year, and he's going to be okay on defense. He's going to be average to, he's just not going to kill you every time.
Yeah, that's going to be the thing, though, is the shooting.
Yeah, and you know what? He's going to have 30, 40-point games once or twice a year, but we know what we're getting out of Buddy Hield, right? So if that's Buddy Hield and he has a 12-year career and he's going to start wherever he goes until he's 32, what does that mean for Cody Williams shooting? I mean, I'm looking at it right now. It's 45.7% from 3. And then
if you look volume, yeah.
Well, it's because he gets to the rim so much. Because he's so good and he's able to get to the rim. He doesn't have to settle. And the Colorado coach is big on him not settling. Doesn't he says to him, I don't need you to settle. I need you to get to your elite skill, right? And the NBA is going to be the same thing. But if you can shoot 45%, even on lower volume, you're a threat. And now it's your curveball setting up your fastball at that point, right? Yeah. And at that point, you're like, whoa. Now, the biggest question mark I have, he only shoots 70 from the line. So obviously, if he's going to keep those 3-point shooting numbers up, you think that free throw percentage rate is going to have to come up a little bit. So even if he shoots 38%, 37%,
all he needs to be is average.
He can be all NBA at 37% because he's going to get to the rim so much that it's going to offset at any point. He's going to be on Sports Center. He's going to be on all these highlight places, all these people saying, oh, Cody Williams is him, and all that stuff. And it's going to be great, but he can also make the right decisions when he gets to the paint. I've seen glimpses of it. With De Silva and those guys, like, they don't have a true, like, really good big, right, in the dunker spot. True, who can finish at an NBA level
above the rim, because Eddie Lampkin is much more post up, push guys around, finish with a hook shot than
he needs space to operate. I'm talking about, you get downhill, you get into the paint to the X in front of the rim, and that guy who's sit in the NBA, you have bigs sitting in the dunker spot all day, and they're elite finishers at the dunker spot. They catch with the hook, they catch one dribble dunk, whatever that is, right? Or they go baseline and get the reverse. So if you put a guy like that with him, oh my gosh, he's going to see him all day. Once he gets about a year and a half into this thing, if he's even remotely as smart as his brother on the basketball IQ, and he thinks the game the way I think he's going to, I don't see how you're going to stop the guy offensively. And then defensively, he's not a minus. I mean, he's not great. He's just average. That's all you need to be, because they can find guys who are elite wing defenders to let you go to your elite skill, which is getting to the rim. It is, there's an old adage that they pay tens of millions of dollars for guys they pay guys tens of millions of dollars to stop them from getting to the front of the rim. They pay guys hundreds of millions of dollars to get to the rim, right? So that right there tells you everything you need to know about where the NBA is at. Downhill guard, keeps people honest with the three, elite finishing. Yeah. And he sees the dump off, and he sees the corner three if they collapse on him. So now you're getting the paint touch to the kick out. I'm telling you, this Cody has a bright future as long as he can get stronger and he can avoid injuries. If he does those two things, you'll at least have a core player on your team.
For sure. Yeah. So you mentioned the elite finishing, and you stressed elite. He is 73.2% at the rim in the half court this season, which is not a number
he's going against three guys. Literally, when he gets into the paint, he's shooting it over three guys.
Yep.
If he had a dunker,
Lampkin too, it's like that's a guy that you can just kind of abandon because he's not going to finish over the top. Like you can't lob it to him. So there's always a big defender in the paint.
Exactly. So we have to take that into accountability. Elite and in college, like, it's kind of skewed, because if you're at Niagara and you're an elite finisher at the rim, odds are you're not facing 6'8", 7-footers at Arizona. And Arizona has a 7-footer. I'm just using Arizona as an example. They have 7-footers in the whole game. It's the whole game. And when you don't have that dunker or the big in the dunker spot who can finish, the bigs understand, I can cheat a little more to this guy. And they do a good job. Like, if you watch any of these Pac-12 teams, rest in peace, Pac-12, but like, these guys collapse on him as soon as he gets into the lane, and he's shooting over one guy, two guys, three, like, they're all in him. So when I say elite, I'm looking at it from a film standpoint. I can see where he goes, and when he is one-on-one with the big, it's going to be really hard to stop him. It's going to be really, really hard to stop him if you have that guy in the dunker. And just think if he's playing with a guy like Kevon Looney or a prime Clint Capella.
Sure. Yep.
It's going to be really hard for people to stop him. And I think at the NBA level, that is an elite skill he has, and he's going to continue to have, because the space is wider and those bigs are way more skilled.
Sounds good. So let's take a quick break. We're going to be back on the other side, and we're going to talk some Jacobe Walter. We're going to talk some Zaccharie Risacher, and we're going to talk some Tyler Smith as well. So stay with us. All right. So Jacobe Walter was another name that you had mentioned a guy you're really high on. I was kind of right there with you. I thought statistically a lot of the stuff looked very similar, especially early in the year, to what a guy like Devin Vassell looked like, what a guy like Desmond Bain looked like
Mhm.
in college. There are
Yeah.
still some of those similarities, unfortunately, with Baylor, and I think we saw it with Keontae George last year. It can be a little tough to evaluate these guys because they always have table setters, but there's always like one guy who is like the grenade guy, where it's like
Yeah.
you're just the guy who's like when there's 6-7 seconds left on the shot clock, like there's one guy that we just give the ball to who needs to figure out how to score. And last year was Keontae George. This year it seems like that's Jacobe Walter. The percentages have taken a little bit of a dip for that reason. I think in a different context it might look better. But 6'4", 6'5", shooting guard, long arms. Solid defender, getting better and better as a passer as the year goes along. What do you see in Jacobe Walter that has you so excited for what he's going to do at the NBA level?
That's I want to commend you on that. I think that's actually a really good assessment of Baylor right now. Right, is that I don't want to say he's playing out of position, but he's doing things that he hasn't had to do a lot of against high level defenders. The Big 12 is stacked with defenders this year. I mean, it is stacked. And I mean, I was watching the Houston game. I was on X. If you guys follow me, so I was locked into Houston. I mean, that was an amazing game, absolutely amazing game. If anybody got to watch it, but you saw there are good and bad with Jacobe. And the biggest thing, if you're a stat person, the shooting has been not what you thought it would be. You know, when I sat down and talked with him earlier this year in preseason, you know, he was asking me, well, what do you think I need to do at the NBA level? And I kind of told him, I said, you know, you can shoot that thing and you can really get downhill sometimes by using your shot to set up your drive. And I said, your passing is not really good. I mean, if you look at his film from, you know, high school and EYBL or any type of spring ball he had for 2 years, he doesn't hit the pocket pass very well, if often at all. It's almost as if he didn't trust it or he didn't want to see it. I don't know which one it was, right? And I told him that. I said, it's, you know, your pocket passes are not clean. You rarely see the big. Also, you miss the swing half the time. Like, you're so locked in on what you're doing that you're not setting yourself up for the next possession, because now it's a pass fake to a shot, the whole defense move, because, you know, it's things like that. And I think and again, I'm not taking credit for it at all. I'm just telling you the conversation we had, but he has gotten a lot better with that. And, you know, one thing in the Houston game that I was actually disappointed about was I don't feel like he wanted the ball. It was more Ray J that was being the guy that was getting to the paint. And Houston did a good job. Their game plan was get Jacobe off the ball and don't let him get it back, right? And that's, you know, that they did a pretty good job of that. I mean, he still had a really good game from last, you know, what I remember. It's like 23, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's not like he had a bad game or anything like that, but the shooting has been disappointing. I feel like if he was Cody Williams at 42, 43, and Cody Williams at 45, I think we're talking him as the potential one. And when I did the podcast with Corey and them earlier, you know, his shooting was a little bit better. And I'm struggling with him. You know, I had him at number one for a sense of it, because I was like, man, if there's anybody else, I can at least know he's a sure 3-point shooter with upside. Right. Yep. And with this shooting, I'm a little worried, but again, I think he's shooting like 86% from the free throw line. So it's not like, is it 85? Yeah. So it's not like, I just think it's more or less he's trying to expand his game. And rather than just going back to what he's really elite at, I think he's been trying to play make a little more. I think he's been trying to get into the paint a little more to show he can drive and, you know, he can get in the paint and make the right decisions. And he made a couple passes to Missy that he hadn't been making earlier in the year. And so I'm a big fan. I think he's a better Buddy Hield.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I think he's a better defender. He has heavy feet and he's not great laterally, but he's better than Buddy was. I don't know that he's as explosive as Buddy was in college, because Buddy was explosive. I mean, he was just, you know, he scored 50 and all that. But I think at the NBA level, that's what you're getting, a better Buddy Hield who can actually like defend probably a lot better, and probably tag and close out way, way, way better.
Yeah, I think the tools and instincts I think the instincts are a lot better than Buddy's for sure. And I just think the tools are solid. Like his arms are long. He's a pretty physical kid too, for the most part. So like you said, like feet a little bit heavy, but it's not like he's, stuck in the mud out there, and he's got some strength to him, got some length. Yeah, I think that's a really good assessment of him. And I think it's also worth noting too, like looking at the shooting numbers, 23.1% on pull-up threes this year, which is just not going to be something he's asked to do much out of the gate. Like it's just it's not going to be as much like time to bail us out and get us a bucket late in the shot clock. Like he can pull up, like he's a solid mid-range pull-up shooter. And I think that's something that you can count on being there for him in time. But I think it's going to be a lot more off-screen spotting up kind of actions out of the gate. And I trust that with his game. Let's talk Zaccharie Risacher. He is big and can really shoot the ball and can defend, which are very important skills in the modern game of basketball. And with some of these teams that we talked about, especially at the top, I think about a team like Detroit, where they've just had a lot of roster kind of fit issues over the years. A team like Washington that for a long time was kind of dealing with spacing problems. A guy like Risacher, where we're looking at a guy that is, 6'9", 6'10", 45% 3-point shooter on good volume, good defender. There's just a really solid baseline there. I think he's also gotten a lot better at playing through physicality, driving to the basket, and things like that over the last calendar year. What are you seeing with him so far this year?
I agree on all that. I love him. The more and more I've watched him and I've gotten to learn about who he is and where he comes from, his dad was a pro too. So it's not like he's coming from nowhere. Like I know in America, sometimes we get lost because there's just a lot going on here in America with college basketball and the pros. And then obviously the prep scene has really grown over the last 3 years because of social media and all that. But there's that second generation now happening overseas where pro players stayed in the country they were in, or this, went to the one next to it, and they're having their kids now, and their kids have grown up. Right. Mm-hmm. And, really, it's a little later than the Americans, because if you remember, the NBA started really becoming international with Manu, Sabonis, and then Manu. Those are like the main guys that came over. Yeah. You've had some other guys that were role players, and whatnot, but the big ones were Sabonis and Sabonis Senior for the young people listening, not Domas. Domas is his son. Yeah. Sorry for the younger guys, but his dad. I think I was in high school when he came, when he came over. Amazing. He was past his prime. If he had come in his prime, we might be talking of him as maybe the greatest player ever by the time he was done with it. I'm not kidding. Go back and watch him. He was beyond Jokic at that point. So he comes from a basketball family. He's been bred to play basketball. He knows how to play, and he's better than his dad was. His dad was a pro A in Spain. You know what I mean? Like, he played in Spain and had a good career, and he played in a couple places and whatnot, but he's been bred to play basketball by the French national team. By now, the guys that have kind of got a hang on him from America. And I've actually talked to a couple people in the last few days just about who he is and his work ethic and like how he is. And that counts. That really counts. And I'm watching him, and I'm not trying to make the French connection there, but he plays an awfully, like he could be Nick Batum better. Yeah. And Nick Batum is really like, if people go back to when Nick Batum in his prime, I mean, he was arguably one of the best wings in especially defensively. And then once he developed his shot, it was a game changer for him. He could be better than him because he does put it on the floor some. He does get to the rim some. But he's like a 5-tool player. Like, he's everything you want. He's got size, he's got length, he's got good athleticism, he sees the floor, he shoots it well enough, he finishes well enough. Like, he can guard all 5 positions. You can switch 1 through 5 with him and feel pretty good about it. At the NBA level, it's probably going to take him a year or two because he's got to get stronger if he's going to switch onto the 5s that are in this league because they're tall, athletic, and mobile, right? So he's going to have to probably get a little bit stronger with them. But if you talk about a guy who has the potential to really change a team's culture and the way that they play, it's him. And if I'm San Antonio at 1, I don't even blink. I'm taking him 1, not even a question.
So this is the other thing I want to kind of follow up with you on, because it's something that I've been trying to get a gauge on, and with just kind of your experience, I'd be interested to pick your brain on it. One comp I've heard for him is Franz Wagner. Now, Franz wasn't kind of like touted as a number 1 pick coming out. but he was, I guess, similar in terms of like just physical dimensions. I think Risacher is probably ahead as a shooter at the same age.
He's bigger than him too.
Yeah, and then I think Franz was probably much more of a ready-made playmaker by the time he came into the league. With Risacher, that's the one thing that I'm like kind of trying to get a gauge for is he really plays within the flow of the offense there because he is on a pro team. So we're talking about a guy that's not really in a position to just say, hey, I'm going to take it over. I'm going to run a bunch of pick and rolls. I'm going to call him for myself and see where it goes.
Right.
He's, a little below water assist to turnover wise, but a guy who doesn't really get to do a whole lot with the ball. Like, what do you buy that coming along for him in the future, given that like the shooting is there? He's not like a poor decision maker. His handle isn't bad, but it's probably not like he's not reading the floor or putting it on the deck the way like a Franz was. So to get to that like game-changing level that we're sort of talking about, like, do you think that that's attainable for him, or do you think that's something that like maybe you just really hope it happens, but you're not betting on it?
Well, I think it's important to be elite at one or two things and be league average at the others or right above league average, rather than trying to be really, really good at everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, like, that's why I use the Batum thing, because Batum realized I'm good at two things, right? Mm-hmm. I could be really good at two, and then my playmaking, they start, as he got older and he saw, 10,000, 12,000 pick and rolls, he started to read them a lot better, right? I mean, people could argue in Charlotte he was their main playmaker, right? Like, you could argue that. So that's why I think he has to take more of a Batum route, because just find the two things that you're elite at. And that's why I think San Antonio is really good for him, because they're going to let it play out and they're going to work on stuff and put you in this box to start and then work your way out of the box as you get better, and your elite skills will, ultimately come out. Mm-hmm. And that's why I like him so much, because I think 3 or 4 of his things could ultimately be elite, whether that's his defensive prowess and his shooting, right? Mm-hmm. Worst case for him, right? In my opinion, he becomes a 3-and-D guy. Like that's the worst case.
And at
6'9", 6'10", you're
and
Nick Batum.
Size, at that
you're
size,
Nick Batum.
Minimum $100 mil on the second contract. You know what I mean?
I mean, and in this draft, it counts. If it was next year, I'd say, he's. I could probably take Flagg or Ace Bailey, and I'm going to have way higher ceiling, because this kid's going to be good. He could be an all-star. Like, he literally could be an all-star. But in next year or the year after draft, when you have Darren Peterson and Koa Pete and all these other guys, right, that are probably going to be more high level than him. But in this draft, in this specific one, if I'm Detroit or I'm San Antonio, I'm not even thinking about anyone else, just personally, because the ceiling is so high, and especially if it's San Antonio, like, there's not it was like Wemby last year. There's not a more perfect place for him to develop than there with Wemby. He has a rim protector. He has a generational talent, guy who changes the game. He can walk in day one and not have to be the man. And he can find himself, and he can find his role. Like, Devin Vassell's not going to stop him from, finding out who he is. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so there, to me, although I know, like, Topic is also very good, and that might be somebody San Antonio goes after because they need a point guard, obviously.
Yeah.
But for me, the talent, the size, the background, he's a generational, professional player. It's hard for me to pass this up. I'll just be honest. And I was thinking this earlier in the year. Mm-hmm. I had him at 3 the whole year so far, and now I'm sitting here going, now that things have kind of shaken out and Jacobe Walter has kind of gone down a little bit, not a ton, just a little bit, and Cody Williams is pretty much where I thought he would be in terms of where he's at, and obviously how I feel about Sarr. Mm-hmm. And I just think that if there's a kid who has the ceiling with the intangibles and the physical tools that go with it, it's hard for me to pass this guy up. And if he blows up, he blows up. I'll take the risk of losing my job in 2.5 years because he doesn't pan out. I'll take the risk on this kid.
That makes more than enough sense. I think that's spot on. Let's
Charlotte. Sorry, real quick.
Well,
just think about Charlotte. Just think if it was Charlotte. Like, how do you not? I mean, Sarr would fit great in Charlotte. They got LaMelo, they got Miller, but your whole lineup, then you have a 6'5" point guard, a 6'8" 3-2, and you have a 6'10" 3-4.
Yeah,
we'll go find some cheap bigs, man. We can trade back in and get Messi at 20 You know what I mean?
And
Like
even with Mark Williams, it's like, I mean, you're giving that guy all the space in the world that you need to be a lob target with that much shooting around him.
And if Mark Williams can't figure it out with those three, then see you later, man. I mean, it's I like you, Mark, but come on, man. You got all that talent. Let's use it here.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. Let's go to Tyler Smith real quick. He's the guy that I wrote about this week. My daughter's attempting to make a cameo right now, so we'll see if she pops.
That's okay.
But
we've all been there.
Yeah. So Tyler Smith is the guy that I wrote about this week. He is a very interesting player on G League Ignite. He is 6'10", 6'11". He is a real deal 3-point shooter, shooting 39% from 3 on the year. But also an effective finisher, really good off-ball cutter, really good as a roll man. But I think the biggest thing I just keep coming back to with him is how he's shooting his threes. The fact that he's a guy who just a minute. All right, sorry about that. So
it's okay. We've all been there.
Yeah. So with Smith, he's a 39% 3-point shooter in the G League, shooting from the NBA line at 19 years old, who is moving into shots off the pop, moving into shots off of screens, hitting him in transition. Like just everything that he's going to be asked to do as a trailer, as a pop man, like that is all there as a 3-point shooter already. Even if you just want to like park him in the corner, he can do that. But there's a little bit more functionality. Really good downhill as a roll man, effective as a cutter, also just a smart decision maker. Like think about how many 6'10", 6'11" guys that you see in college that are negative on the assist to turnover front. And he's positive, and he's doing it in the G League on a team with not a lot of structure, not an effective roll man big, not an effective point guard to get the offense going. Like it's just a lot of chaos. And the fact that even within that, he's proven himself to be a solid decision maker, I think is impressive. The defense is a little hit or miss. I wish he played guys tighter on the perimeter. He has some missed rotations, but the flashes are there. The tools are there. He's strong. When he sits down in his stance, I like how he guards guys on the perimeter. And he's had this really hot stretch late in the year. And I think the shot blocking has come along too. Like it just seems like late in the year, he's getting more and more comfortable. He's getting better and better. And we are now at a point where I'm just looking at this guy and I see safety. And the fact that he's 6'10", 6'11" with an NBA body, and the fact that he's a flamethrower from the 3-point line, I can trust him to move the ball, even if he's not, a point forward or anything like that. And I get excited about the ceiling. And I started just look at some guys that were statistically similar pre-draft. And a guy that came up was actually Lauri Markkanen. And I looked at some of the Lauri film, and Tyler Smith's big issue is that, like, if you chase him off the line, right now, he's a little upright with the ball. The handle kind of stinks. He drives into guys super upright and isn't a good finisher when it's him attacking in a straight line. And he likes to go in one direction every single time. I look up Lauri Markkanen's numbers on Synergy, look at the film on Synergy. He had the exact same problem. It was all driving in one direction, driving too upright, not being as explosive at the rim as his physical tools indicate he should be. I was having deja vu watching the Lauri Markkanen college film when I went into it for this article. I really like Tyler Smith. I like the floor. I love the upside. A lot of times I do these deep dives on guys, and I'm just watching a ton of their film, and by the end of it, I'm like, man, like I'm just looking at all the flaws. And Tyler Smith, I couldn't help but get really excited. I see him as a lottery pick. Is that nuts, or do you kind of view him in a similar light?
No, sometimes simple is better. Like I think sometimes we get, all of us, I've done it too. I'm guilty. We get caught up in all the athleticism and all the things people do, and then what they can do. And like, sometimes the easiest thing is right in front of our face, that what we need to do. Mm-hmm. Right. And his efficiency is so good. Mm-hmm. He's really impressed me. And if you look, like when Holland's been out, I haven't looked up the numbers, but I've been watching the film on it. Right. Yeah. I didn't look up the numbers, see what the exact splits difference is and whatnot. But with Holland off the floor, he's actually a lot better, in my opinion, just from the film I was watching on him. As we were getting ready for this, I hadn't watched him a ton. I went and saw the Ignite earlier this year in person. He was okay. I didn't feel like he did great. But after we talked, what was it, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, I went back and I've been watching him for about 9 days. I've been trying to get some games into his, and then obviously just, in the past, what he was doing as their season's winding down. And it's boring, but it's good. It's really good. And I'm very impressed with him. That role is exactly who he'd be at the next level. And if he is a true 6'11", like I start thinking about guys who play that type of way or who played, right? And I think of like Channing Frye.
Yeah.
And I think of guys like, man, Channing, such a smart player, literally decided I'm going to be the best 3-point shooting big ever. That's what his mindset was. Obviously, he didn't, he was really good though, right? And he just said, I'm just going to be, this is who I am, and I'm going to help defend the rim, and I'm going to just be okay in drop and in against pick and rolls, and I'm going to shoot the lights out. I'm going to make LeBron's life easy. I'm going to make whoever, in Phoenix, I was going to, did he play with Nash? I think he did.
Yeah,
if it was Goran Dragic, it was Dragic and them. Like, I'm just going to make their life totally easy because my guy's going to have to decide. Does he want to come out on me and I shoot 44% from the top of the key? Or does he want to keep going, or does he want to play on me? And now I have Goran Dragic, one of the best downhill lefties ever, in his prime, like getting right to the rim. Like, it's going to be really hard to defend. And it, like, the fact that he's keeping it simple and he's not trying to like show us all his game and, post up and fade away Kobe style and all that like stuff. I actually appreciate that because so many young bigs, like there's guys in high school who are 6'11", 6'10" that I've watched, and they're like, oh, I got to show what I got. I got to show the league what I got. I got to show colleges what I got. When really most of us just want you to be 6'11" and shoot threes if you're open and protect the rim and run the floor and be 6'11". Like, be your advantage, right? And be your length. And I appreciate, like, and by the way, he's not a minus athletically or like if you watch his rotations, he's a little slow because he doesn't, especially earlier in the year, he was a little slow because he was getting used to the speed of the game and he was trying to like, you could tell he was a step behind, but he was trying to catch up. And as the years gone on, he's starting to slowly get there, right? And that will be his big thing in the NBA. Can he protect the rim? Because I think his shooting's fine. He shoots it deep too sometimes. Like he's shooting it a foot, behind the 3-point line on some point. So, I like him. Is he a lottery pick? I think with the right team, yes. I think if there's a team at 12, 13 that, even 11, maybe he has a great, maybe he has great workouts. Maybe he, there are falling in love with the guy is a real thing. And, what if he goes to a workout in Memphis? I'm just making it up, and what if it's Memphis and he shoots, they have him shoot 200 shots and he makes 155 of them, like they're going to go, oh my God, that's our guy, because he could play with Jackson. Like he can play with, you know what I'm saying? Like he can play with those other guys. Gigi would, his minutes probably go down a little bit, but again, I'm just using Memphis as an example because they may be down there. I mean, there's teams out there that can use this. And the cool thing is like, he doesn't have like a super high usage in terms of like demanding the ball and having to do all that. Like who doesn't want a 6'11" guy who's learning to play defense and getting better, can protect the rim fine, as long as he's an average rim protector. But if he's shooting 44 from 3, like, and especially 44 on pick and pops, like on any part of the floor, like top of the key for the wings, that means you can run all types of sets. You can run horn sets. You can run floppy sets. You can run all the zipper sets. You can run all of this with him because you can screen the screener and he's wide open. You know what I mean? No matter how you mask it, you just screen the screener. He's the initial screen. You screen the other guy and boom, you're there. Right. Yeah. So I'm a fan. I'm a fan. I'm again, another guy I'm really happy for because I didn't even notice him on the floor in terms of like when I was there. I knew he was there, but like he wasn't playing very well.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think like the screener stuff that you mentioned is like super functional for him too. And it's something that they've done too, where they set it up like it's going to be like an elevator screen, but then he just cuts back to the rim and it's a lob. Like there's all sorts of stuff that you can do because of that shooting gravity. Guys don't want him to get open on the perimeter, and you can use that to just get back inside and be a lob target. Like there's so many ways that they can just set him up easily because he's such a good 3-point shooter. That it's, and like you mentioned, like, some of those like Channing Frye kind of guys, like something I said in the article is that like there's some solid boring outcomes for him. Like if he's close to like what Bobby Portis was, who was a 6-man on title team, he's coming in like taller and a better shooter than Trey Lyles, who's a 20-minute per game guy on a playoff team. Like
he's better than Trey Lyles right now.
Yeah. Like there's all these guys that it's like, I think he's going to be better than that guy. So like if you're generally looking at how drafts tend to pan out, like, usually those guys end up being guys that in a redraft would go around 14, 15. And like, I think he's better than they were coming into the draft. So He's a guy that I think has kind of been underrated a little bit heading into the draft. So we're going to take one more break, and we're going to talk some sleepers on the other side. So stick with us. All right. So we're going to go a little bit quicker through these here. One guy I wanted to touch on is Coleman Hawkins at Illinois. He's a guy who has been really sort of up and down, a little bit erratic over the past years. I think I said he was like an erratic Boris Diaw at one point a couple years ago. But part of what made Boris Diaw is that there was a level of consistency and solid decision making and things like that, where Coleman Hawkins at 6'10", could get really out of control with his turnovers at times, would take really bad threes. This year, the shot looks a lot better. He's taken almost 5 threes a game, 39%. Really positive assist to turnover ratio for the first time in his career, where he's like just firmly above board in that respect. The defense is the best it's ever been. He's gotten a little bit stronger. It seems like he just is not in the conversation much. And I get it. If people have looked at past tape or they said, hey, he had that really weird bad start to this year, he's still really up and down at times. Like, I get it, but at a certain point in the second round, I see a guy who's 6'10", can defend multiple positions, can really do some stuff with the ball, and is hitting a shot. And like, yeah, I like you got to take the good with the bad to a degree. I kind of like him in that range. So what are your Coleman Hawkins thoughts, if you have any?
So he's a little flawed, right? I mean, I appreciate the shooting, like you said, and also, he's shooting 80% from the line. Mm-hmm. So it's a drastic change from the last 3 years where he's been in the mid 60s, I think. Mm-hmm. So you're seeing, I'd like to see him get to the free throw line more though, right? As a big, you want to kind of, especially in this NBA, you have to learn how to manipulate the refs and get to the line more. And that's a lot of what if you look at really the majority of the top 10 scorers, they all get to the free throw line a lot because they manipulate the refs, right? You've heard, I'm sure, a lot of coaches in front of people talk about this and scouts. Yep. And so what I appreciate his growth, but a big thing is the rebounding. Mm-hmm. You are 6'10", man, and 6 rebounds a game at 6'10", 6'11" is not going to get it done. And it makes me think he's 6'8". It makes me think he's 6'9". Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would like to see him I'm sure he'll be at the Combine or Portsmouth or something where we can get his measurables, right? And his if you actually look, you mentioned his assist turnover ratio, which it's actually not that different from last year. He's just turning it over less. Yeah. So it's not that I don't think he's become a less efficient player, a player who has gotten so much better in that aspect. I just think he stopped. Yeah, I just think he stopped turning it over. I think, I bet you the coaching staff literally said to him, hey man, stop turning it over so much, because that's a lot for a big. Like 2+ for a big, that's a lot, unless you're Kevin Durant or, like somebody who's a big, like Giannis, who's big, but they're really not, they're not a big like that. You could take a shot on him in mid-second. It would depend. I've always said, in this new CBA, there's really 3 types of guys you draft in the second round, right? 1 are guys you want to take a shot on. 2 are the guys who want to bet on themselves and not take two ways. And the third one is people who take two ways, right? Yeah. That's really the 3 groupings of second round guys. It's not really about talent or anything like that. It's literal, do I like this player enough to give him guaranteed money? If I don't, will he take a 2-way? And if he doesn't, he wants to go Kenrich Williams and bet on himself on a camp contract. Those are my 3 options now. I don't really see, there might be a couple outliers in there and whatnot, but really that's the second round now. So if he's willing to take I bet you if he's willing to take a 2-way, I guarantee you there's going to be 3 teams that'll take him 42 to 50, if they want to get the 2-ways out. Mm-hmm. But again, solid player. I think he had 30 yesterday. Now that I remember, didn't he have 30, something like that?
A real bad game, and then he bounced back with 30 yesterday.
Yeah, he also matches up really well with Iowa. Let's call it what it is. His size and his offensive skill really is good. But I appreciate the big thing for me is the improvement on the free throw percentage. It's up 15 points. So that's a huge jump. Like that's, I know it may not sound like a lot because we're here just talking numbers and it's you and me and, everybody listening. But 15 percentage points on free throws is a lot. That is a lot.
Massive.
So just the percentage alone helps. But solid guy. If he rebounded at 8, 9, I'd probably be like, for sure he can go 39.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. Kenrich, that's why I brought Kenrich up, because I was thinking outside the box there. But Kenrich was 6'7.5", 6'8", but he was the best rebounder in all of college basketball. And again, that's skewed sometimes because, the non-conference games and whatnot, like it can get skewed, right? But it was consistent across the board once you got into Big 12 play with him over the years. Like it wasn't just like this little pool of 10 games. It was like Big 12 for his career. And that's huge, right? And with him, he's in the Big 10. It's not like it's a bunch of, guys who don't know how to play basketball. Like this is a hard conference. And I think he just hangs out too much from when I watched him.
Yeah.
He hangs out too much. And like when you hang out too much, you miss offensive rebounding opportunities. And that's probably why he's not getting 7, 8. I don't see, like, if he wasn't hanging out behind the 3-point line or hanging out, not crashing or whatever that is, like he probably could get that 2 extra rebounds a game offensively. That would probably change. Literally, it could change his whole draft positioning in this draft.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Another guy that we talked about is Jalen Bridges at Baylor. Just a real solid kind of 3-and-D option. 3-point percentage and 3-point volume both looking really good compared to where they were a year ago, taking about 5 threes a game, 39.4%. Athletic, makes some work on the offensive glass for sure. And just a solid, like, move the ball decision maker who's shown a little bit more as far as putting it on the ground. Another guy I kind of like in that second round range. Usage isn't the highest because of the role. Like we talked about all the guards they've got on their team earlier, but what's your temperature with him?
Solid player. I like that he doesn't need the ball in his hands and he still plays defense. I think that's sometimes you get these guys that aren't mature enough to understand that if I'm not shooting it and I'm not making it, I can't play defense. And I don't know that I've seen him really do that. Like he's had some games where he missed a lot of shots and he still goes out and plays solid defense. And that is a big plus for me. Now, does he ultimately play in the NBA? I think he's going to get a shot. I think he'll get a shot, whether that's a 2-way or whether that's a 10-day or maybe even a camp contract. Maybe someone really likes, his size, which he has good size for his position. He shoots it well enough. He's at 40% this year. He's at 38 for his career. Free throw percentage is at 88. Like those are base smart. Like I'm sure you and I could do an advanced on all of these guys and we could really dig in, but obviously we don't have all the time, but just trying to give some baselines of, and then against Houston, I think he had like 15 or 17. Like he made tough shots. If you watched, he was in the corner, like the guy's closing out hard on him and he's catching that thing and shooting. So that's his elite skill, is his shooting. Can he do it at the NBA level? I think he can. If there's a guy in this draft that could sneak up on people, and in 3 years we're looking back like, oh man, how come we didn't see him? It could be Bridges, from the sense of he is shooting it at 40% and he's just shooting that thing and he's playing really solid defense. And there's too many teams that need shooting at that position and that size.
Yeah.
And where he's not net negative on defense at the NBA level, that you would take shots on him. Like Oklahoma City would take a shot on Jalen Bridges, I think.
Totally.
San Antonio would take a shot at Jalen Bridges. Like I shouldn't say good, but like the teams that focus on that aspect and that development, I think someone's going to give him a shot just because of that size, that positional size, and the fact that he can shoot it at 40%.
Sure. So someone who's a teammate of his last year that is now elsewhere is LJ Cryer at Houston. He's a guy that, like, I feel like he hasn't gotten a lot of mainstream draft buzz, but it was something that you brought up and, like, just quietly improved quite a bit at Houston this year. He's a small guard, but he's always been just this electric 3-point shot maker. And he's gotten better as a decision maker this year. And it also feels like he's just playing more defense in the games I've watched too. Like, it just seems like there's a better effort level, a little bit more willingness to say, hey, I'm not going to shoot this one, or just a little bit more sound decision making. Like, I'm not like sold on him because I still just see like small guard who isn't a great creator for others, and I don't know what the defense is going to look like, but electric scorer. How are you feeling about Cryer at this stage?
I don't know. I mean, LJ's about 6'1". Like, it's not like he's 5'10".
Sure.
So but the problem in today's NBA, and again, I'm very like, I think kind of the deal going to Houston was Kelvin said, you need to play defense here. Like Kelvin, the thing I love about Coach Stanley, he demands effort in defense, right? That's just the start of it. If you don't want to do either of those things, see ya. Like, we don't have time for you. And I think LJ's really done a good job of capitalizing. He plays hard all the time for the most part there. His shooting it's down a little bit this year, but I think it's because the type of shots he's getting. And, the dude's a national champion. Like, he knows how to play. And I think ultimately, if you really look at it, like, he's still averaging about the same amount of points, same amount of assists, same amount of rebounds, pretty much. But his turnovers are way down. It's almost one turnover less a game. So they're at 0.7. That's amazing. So can he run your team at the NBA level? No. That's not him. He's at best in the NBA. I think actually LJ is going to have a great career in Europe. I think his game is it's going to fit really well in EuroLeague. And I think he's going to have a long career, and I think he's going to make a lot of money over there. He's probably going to make 30, 40 million by the time he's done with it, which is not a bad gig. If you guys have ever been to Partizan or Red Star, it's electric over there. It is electric. Basketball is life, right? And I don't know. I like him. I like the fact that he can shoot, and I just like the fact that he's like mentally tough. At that level, like at that size and that position, you're never going to be a lead guard because you're not pass first. So you're not really going to be initiating offenses. You have to have offenses to initiate for you, right? And I don't know if that's an NBA guard, but I do think he could be a really good Euro guard, just from the fact that he can score pretty much from anywhere. Yeah. And even at his size, he's strong and he's smart and he'll get to his spots.
Yeah, and I think in Europe too, like the size will be less of a factor. Like it'll just be easier to slide him into like an off guard type of role over there than it would be here. Let's close on a really hot name, Colin Murray-Boyles at South Carolina. He's a guy that a lot of people are getting like just red hot for him. He has been kind of the biggest riser the last couple of weeks. He's a 6'7" freshman, great offensive rebounder, really good feel as a passer, moves his feet really well defensively, high block and steal percentages, feel is off the charts, physically strong, just does not shoot threes at all. 65% from the free throw line. I am a little bit more trepidatious with him just because it's 6'7" without the shot. Like, I'm not totally seeing what the NBA role is. I think he's a guy that if he comes back, he could just explode next year because of that combination of gifts. I just think like, hey, you were sick to start this season. It took a lot away from you to just take the offseason, iron out that jumper, and then go nuts next year. But I can understand why teams would maybe think that, hey, well, if he comes in this year and it's a bad draft, maybe we get him early. Like, how do you feel about this guy? Because he's been a really hot name in scouting circles.
I mean, I like him. I like him a lot. If there's a GG Jackson talent that can, obviously he's not as touted as GG was, but like a guy from the situation of like, and GG had some off court issues that, kind of dropped him as well, some immaturity things and whatnot. But you got to look at the upside of this, right? What's his worst? In your opinion, what's his worst case scenario comp-wise?
I think there's a chance that if like he doesn't shoot, that he is out of the league. Like
and if he shoots 32%, is he still in the league?
32%, he's like a rotation player on a playoff team, like a good rotation player, possibly even a starter.
So like a spot starter, best case scenario, like rotational guy overall. He'll have an 8-year career playing 4 different teams. Yeah.
Like I think if he's 32%, like we're kind of off to the races. Like I think he's an extremely valuable player at that point.
Yeah, I think the intangible about him is like how hard he plays, but also like he feels the game really well, and he thinks it. He doesn't try to be someone he's not. And I appreciate that about him. And like, if you actually look at the numbers, they're not pretty. Like you're looking at him going, I can't do this with guy who shoots 65 from the free throw line, I think. And like, he shoots 58 from the field. So it's not bad, but it's not great. And he shot 5 threes. I think it's 5 threes this year. So
something like that.
It's hard to play in the NBA with never shooting threes. You got to be 7'1". And that's where I struggle with him. Now, I do like his intangibles. I think and his build's great too. Long kid, 6'8", I think, 6'7.5", like strong. The physical, that's what everybody's getting excited about, is he's getting results with his physical tools. And again, that goes back to, if we go all the way back to when we started, what can we control, right? We can't teach 6'7.5", 6'8". We can't teach, plus length. We can't teach athleticism. Can't do any of that. But what can we do in the NBA? Well, we can make sure that he shoots 200 threes every day. We can make sure that he runs a short roll and is able to hit the floater. We can make sure that if we're, running X offense, that he gets into his spot and we're going to shoot that shot 100 times a day, every day for 300 days or however long those guys are there, 285 days. And over time, we're going to win the battle of the other guy who may have that skill now, but he doesn't have the athleticism, the length, and the body to go with it, and could never have the genetics to do it, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why, and again, I think I'm trying to explain that because I think there's a lot of times people go back to past drafts and go, oh, they just picked this guy. I don't know what they're doing. Well, no, you're betting. Nobody knows ultimately who these guys are going to, end up being until you get to the league and whatnot. All you can do is your best is project and know what type of people they are. And if you know what type of person they are and they have some physical tools, because like, I hate to break it to everybody that's like listeing, but Danny Ainge isn't dumb. Sam Presti's not dumb. I hate to break it to you guys. Like, like Brad's not dumb. None of these guys are like, these guys have seen more basketball. No offense to anybody listening, but they've seen more basketball than they probably forgot more basketball than about. Mm-hmm. And, they can go back and say, well, they didn't project out and he didn't know what he was doing. And it's adding this and that. And it's like, well, we never know. But what we can do is just do our best from what we've done, what we've seen be successful, and then what can carry over that we think physically, right? Mm-hmm. So we can control the development process. So, but if you go to a team that has no development process, well, you're up shit creek. I mean, excuse my language, but you're up shit creek without a paddle. And and he couldn't go to the Hornets this year. Like if he went to the Hornets in this, you're asking for trouble because he plays the same position as the number 2 pick, but also the development would be focused on LaMelo and Miller. And even though he might be the, 8th pick or whatever, he's going to get fallen behind. And I'm not saying that because Charlotte has a bad development system. I'm just saying that their focus is somewhere else and they need to put Brandon Miller is going to be more important to them than he will. So, and I think that's where I struggle is I don't want to take a guy who situationally might be good somewhere. It's going to be that means your odds just from a statistical standpoint, like probability, are lower that he actually hits because you have to be the right place. And if you're not humble enough to be like, we're probably not the right place for him because we're a contender or we're Memphis and we have a Western Conference contending playing team when we're healthy. Well, when Ja's back and everybody's back next year, we're planning on being in the Western Conference Finals or the NBA Finals next year. No offense to the kid, but you're going to have to kind of come along on your own because we got to worry about Bane. We got our main guy's the main guy. So that's why I think he ultimately, I think if he does come out, he'll probably measure really well and somebody will fall in love with him, but he's a 23 to 30 for me, maybe even 22 to 35. Just because of the physical tools and what you can control. If he was putting these numbers up and he wasn't the physical person that he is, just the way he's built, we wouldn't even be talking about him.
No, I agree. I think he's really interesting. And I think your points are spot on. And I think especially too, even if you look at teams that have had some developmental success, Houston has done a great job with Alperen Şengün. But if he goes to a team like Houston, they still have Jalen Green. They still have Amen Thompson. They still have Cam Whitmore. There's just all these other guys. And even at the NBA level, developmental resources are still finite. They still only have so many people on a staff. They can only give so much individual attention to certain players that like it's still tricky in a situation like that. Even if you can say, hey, like this program has done a good job with these players, like it's going to take the right landing spot. I think if he comes out this year, where I think if he takes another year, he can if the shot gets there, he can kind of go anywhere. Conversely, there's also the gamble that if he comes back next year and the shot isn't there, then is there any interest at all? Or are people starting to say, hey, this is more of like a guy like Dylan Mitchell, right? Like where last year people were really intrigued.
Good name.
Goes back this year, the shot's not there. And now like, he's just an athletic defender and that's it.
I'll just be honest with you. I will never be an agent, but if I was, I would tell my guys, you're coming out. We're doing this. Like this. Don't give NBA teams a chance to assess you more when you don't have to be assessed anymore.
Sure.
It's so if I'm his agent, I'm like, we're going, baby. We're riding this train. I don't care where you go. Like if you go 33, you still get a guaranteed. Like it's cool, man. You know, like it's great. We're winning any way you go, but there's more risk for him to stay rather than risk to go, in my opinion.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I think you just ride the train, bro, because these numbers they do not look good. So if I'm his agent, if he has one yet, I'm literally telling him, go, baby. We're rolling. This train's going. Do the best you can in workouts, because I know the highest his value is going to be is now. Because right now he is not going to turn that field goal percentage up to 62%, and he is not even going to. He better start shooting more threes, and they better go in, because if they don't, you're probably going to Portsmouth in 3 years.
Yeah.
So you go now, and you don't let them assess you anymore. That's my opinion, anyways.
That's interesting. I like that. That's a good way to close it out. Dan Purcell, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on X at DanP_NBA. I believe that's my Insta handle too. I mean, heck, it's probably is.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You can follow me at Boundboards. Follow No Ceilings at NoCeilingsNBA.com. Subscribe to the Substack at NoCeilingsNBA.com as well. And make sure you're subscribed on our podcast platform, our YouTube channel, all that as well. We appreciate you all tuning in, especially the folks in the live chat. We'll see you all again next week. Have a great night.